Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Music podcast. I'm your host, T. Davis, and today I'm happy to be joined by my friend, Tanir Morrison. What's up, man?
Nothing much. I'm just hanging out, chilling. So grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me over here. I've been watching your podcast for a little bit, so excited to be in the room.
I'm just bummed that it took this long, and that, you know how it is in this town, man. Like we met, I think, within the month that we moved here. Was it a post in like YEP?
It
or
was.
something? Yeah.
Because I remember you had said, like, hey, I'm coming to Nashville. First time I've been here. Is anyone new around? I'd love to meet people and talk. And I just sent you a message. And I think you came out and visited my studio space. And we hung out for a little bit there. And then this is the first time I've been to your space in like what, months since we met each other? It's crazy.
It's basically been like a year, dude.
Basically, yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I was gonna say last time was whenever we met for the first time was whenever I think snow had freshly melted too. So back to square one.
But yeah, man, like I'm really stoked to have you on. And what I always do when I have someone on for the first time, I just like to give you the opportunity to kind of like in your own words describe what you do and like how you kind of ended up here in Nashville.
So, oh man, where to start with that? I guess that story really starts with where I was in college. I was in college up in Boston, and I met my girlfriend up there, and her family used to live in Southern Illinois, and then they moved to Nashville, and she's been on like American Idol and stuff like that before, and so when she was in college with me, I thought that was like the coolest thing, and we were always deciding like where we were going to go, and she was like, oh, Nashville's the place to be, and I was like, Nashville? No, I'm not going to Nashville. Nashville is like where all the country music is, and I'm not even a country music guy. And so I was just like, no, that's not going to happen. But then a beautiful little thing called the pandemic happened, and I got stuck down here over the pandemic for like 7 or 8 months before school back up in Boston started up again, because Boston was super strict on all of their COVID stuff. So I got trapped here out where the studio I kind of co-own and run is. I got kind of trapped out there for a little bit. And so then we went back to Boston. We finished up our degrees. And then we were like, well, where are we going to go? And she had already had sort of a studio space that they didn't know what they were going to do with. And so by that point, I was like, well, let's start a production company and do some music. And there's already a building here. And so I was like, okay, I guess Nashville is where I'm going then.
Yeah.
And so after I graduated with that, I moved down here, and I've been doing the studio production company thing ever since, as often as I can, doing engineering, producing. I'll even play. And sometimes we have gigs that our artists will do in and around Nashville too that I'll do. I've gone even as far as up to like Indiana to go and do stuff for people, recording music videos and all that and whatnot. But you know, anything you can possibly do,
right?
Engineering and music wise, wearing as many hats as possible.
Yeah, I feel like we all have to do that kind of like a little bit. So the studio is Brunjo, right?
Yeah, Brunjo Music Production. We have a studio out in a place called Kingston Springs, which is pretty far out there in terms of Nashville. I always like to tell people it's like right on the line before Nashville stops being Nashville. We're like right there, right on the cusp of it in the middle of the woods. So
it's a really beautiful area though. It's really, really nice. And the studio space was so cool, man. It was a good time the day that I got to go out there and like check it out. And you showed me the console and all that stuff, man. That's what's up.
We got a Audient 8024 that we got from another studio called, I think, the Laughing Heart Studio. That's somewhere in East. And it was funny. The only reason they were getting rid of one of theirs is because they had another one already. And also, big shout out to Audient too, because they've been helping me fix that. And they don't need to. I'm very, very grateful for that. They're really helpful with that.
Right on, man. So you went to school in what were you going to school for?
My degree was in music production engineering. And then I also have another degree in songwriting with a minor in music technology. So my whole idea, because there was a bunch of different degrees that kind of went with kind of putting all of those into one big umbrella. but I didn't really want to like follow just the tiny tidbits and pieces of it. I wanted to like dedicate to like the full degree, just because that way you could do the cooler stuff. Like for instance, with MP&E, music production engineering, you could actually get to use the nice studios that they had. Whereas if you just went with like the, slice of whatever it is that you want, you only got to go to like a certain studio. Same thing with like songwriting too. There were a bunch of songwriters there that were really prolific in their time of songwriting, or, would help out with a bunch of other projects and artists. But to get to their classes, you had to be a songwriting major. And then to do like the music tech stuff that I wanted to do, you had to like dedicate yourself to it. So I really wanted to do like the cool stuff involved with the major rather than just like a little tidbit of it. So I studied pretty much all of those, did what should have been a 5-year degree in 4, just mainly by doing summers and stuff like that and working my way up. But yeah.
Nice. So like, where are you from originally, and what got you so interested in music that you wanted to pursue it in your education and as a career?
I would say I have this very vivid memory of my dad driving me to school, because I'd always been a player. Like I'd always like played drums, and my family had put me in lessons because apparently when I was really young, I was like tapping on the table and stuff like that. And it was a more consistent tap than just like, goofing around. And even my parents would look at me and be like, hold on, wait, do that again. And then I'd do it. My brother would try to do it. And my parents were like, no, you're just smacking the table. He's doing something different there. He's doing like paradiddles, like what's going on? And so they put me into lessons. And I remember driving to school with my dad after some of the lessons that I had, and I'm listening to some music with him. I don't remember exactly what, but knowing my dad was probably like David Bowie or something like that, because he absolutely loves David Bowie. And so I remember hearing that, listening to like the drummer, and I was like, yeah, I like this drummer for doing this and that. And then he looked at me, he was like, well, most musicians at that level can play more than just their one instrument. And for like a 7-year-old kid, that's like, huh? What? You can do more than one thing? I don't get that. And so we started talking about that, and then he got to this point, and it was the thing that wouldn't leave my memory, which is he was like, the most important people are the ones that are behind the glass, because they're the ones that are making everything sound good. They're doing all the mics and stuff like that. And I think now, knowing what I know about my dad and looking back on that, I think that was because that was the area of music that he never really got to explore, never really got to be into that much. He knew people who played and stuff like that, but never someone who was like a producer or an engineer. And so I think I went to performing arts charter school, and I got to learn up on the performance side of things, but never the tech, never the engineering, never the production side. So when I got to college and then that was an option, I was like, that's it for me. I'm doing that because my dad had said the people behind the glass are the ones that really know what's going on. I want to see if that was true. And so I remember trying out for it too. And I didn't even get it the first time. They were like, yeah, no, sorry. This major's full. You can try again next semester.
Wait, what was there like an audition process for the production?
Yeah, because I think it was, there's only so many studios. And so you can only have so many students using the time properly. And so they can only let in a certain number of students per semester, which was different from like other majors. Like if I wanted to go into like performance and be like just a drum performance kid, well, I can't even tell you how many practice rooms. And at that point, you can have your own drum kit that you can play on. Yeah, whatever. You want to do performance. If you got high up enough to certain like teachers and stuff, then it might get a little bit more, selective. But in terms of like studio stuff, there's only so many. So they had to like really limit it. You had to have a certain amount of GPA. You had to have certain kind of credits that you were taking that were showing that this is what you wanted to do. And I think the whole reason was to give other students the appropriate amount of time to use those nice studios. Because if it was packed, I mean, I would have hated having to share studio time whenever you're like freshly learning about it. You want to just be in there by yourself. It's an intimidating thing. And I mean, not like they don't have other people in there and stuff like that, but to just have like alone time with you and a console in a room so you can put your phone playing some music on a stool and try out some mics, try out some routing on your own. And so I think that's why they like limited the amount of like people. So you had to like go in and audition.
What was the audition process like for the like more technical side?
They had, it was interesting because I did it twice because I didn't get in the first time. The first time that I did the audition was with the chair of the major, and it was very like easy to do because he was just asking like simple questions like, what's your inspiration on this, or where's your passion lie with this? Is this something that you're trying to learn to do for yourself, or are you trying to learn to do it for other people? Where is like, are you going to be spending a lot of time working on like your own band stuff? Are you focused on performance, that kind of thing? Because I think they're really just trying to figure out the students that wanted it the most and were willing to dedicate themselves to it. One of the big things that I know, at least from other people who tried to audition, was that they really wanted to prioritize you not working on your own music. Because that was like, it's at least now it's its own separate major, but to do like production and engineering involves, you're bringing in other artists, you're bringing in other players. How are you going to work with them? It's not just for you. It's detaching you from the project and doing that kind of like good work for that project. And I think that was the big thing that they were looking for. That and then like grades, but I think grades was more so just to weed out more people in a way.
People who like, it's like, okay, well, you're not really keeping up with English.
Right.
So,
you can't do the math side of things.
Yeah. And so I don't think you said this. Were you at Berklee?
Yeah. Berklee College of Music up in Boston. Sometimes I don't know why. I always feel like sometimes that's almost taboo to say because there's such bad actors that can come out of Berklee. Not like that they are bad themselves. It's just, they'll just like spout it like it's a water fountain, just putting it everywhere. I went to Berklee. And I don't want to be one of those people who's like, by the way, I went to Berklee.
Yeah. You've successfully done that. I had to ask. That's everybody. I asked. Okay. Yeah. Right on, man. So like you said you remember like your dad listening to like, I don't know, like David Bowie or whatever, but what artists were you into as a kid? Like you started drumming from a young age. Like what were you like, I want to put this on first thing in the morning,
It was funny. There was a pivotal moment in my life when I had about $20 and I was in a Target looking at CDs back when that was the only way that you could really listen to something without going on iTunes and spending the exact same amount. And so I looked at what Target had to offer at that point, and it was a brand new Linkin Park record and a brand new Coldplay record. So I had a choice to make, and I went with the Coldplay record, which is funny because I ended up liking the Linkin Park record later on, but I went with the Coldplay one. So Coldplay was like my first, holy crap, I love this band. This is amazing. I listened to them nonstop. I'm pretty sure that was, what's the album with the wings on it, like Ghost Stories or something. That was the one it was that I picked up. Then I got into Coldplay, started listening to them a lot more. But I think the big major thing that led to like the question you're asking, like what did I put on in the morning and would listen to, was when I was working in this one show that my school called Ensemble Immersion, because we were performing arts school. So we had, like dancing, we had writing, there was acting, music, and like visual media. So there was all of them. So the whole point of Ensemble Immersion was to bring all of those people together, and then you made a show. And so I was just a player in it. And they had asked me, oh, can you learn this song called Exit Music for a film by Radiohead? And I was like, I have no idea who that is. Sure. That sent me down the rabbit hole. And I got into Radiohead from that point on. And Radiohead became like one of my mainstay bands that if I was listening to something, especially around the ages of 15 to like 19, most likely it was Radiohead.
And that they bring together kind of a lot of different elements.
Yeah.
So you're dabbling in a lot of genres because they were so unique for that exact thing.
Right, exactly.
Okay, right on. Um, so you came down here basically because you got stuck here during COVID.
A little bit, yeah.
What has your experience been like kind of adapting to that reality of, well, here we are, and what was that period? Talk about that time period where you're like basically stranded in Kingston Springs for 7 months.
Right.
And how did you decide, okay, well, we're going to take this building on this property and we're going to, like, how did Brunjo emerge from that scenario?
Right. At first, I think it all started because I was in one of those classes that's like, you know, like audio tech or something, with who at the time was just a friend of mine, but eventually ended up becoming my girlfriend. And she was kind of talking about, you know, she didn't really know what she was wanting to do. It's like, you know, how far into college, you know, only 2 years in, you still got two years left to move on. So it's like, you're kind of thinking about it, but not really. And I was just like, you know, why not just start a production company? I want to make music. I want to make music for other people. I love doing that. I love inspiring people to make things and helping them get their dreams to fruition. And so I was like, let's start a production company, just randomly out of nowhere. And she was like, okay. There was nothing tied to it. No contracts, no name, no nothing. It was just, sure, we're going to get together and we're going to make music sometime. That's really what it was all about. And that grew into me inviting more people to be along with it, eventually ending up including me having 5 members in it. And the way that we got the name, funny enough, was in Berklee, there's this building called the 1140 building and then the 160 building, and they're connected by a street called Haviland Street. And I would have to go from that 1140 building, from my African drumming class, to my Audio Tech 1 class, which was in the 150 building, which was next to 160. So I always had to pass through this street. And I don't know what happened there. Maybe it's just like root systems or really bad infrastructure planning, but the sidewalks were always really bad. Like, they would always be cracked, destroyed, probably the winter, honestly, now that I think about it. And so they would always have to replace them. And so as I would walk from that building to the other building, I'd be like just listening to music, looking down, and someone wrote on one of the freshly fixed pieces of sidewalk concrete what looked like BRUNJO. And I was like, what is a Brunjo? What does that mean? And so when I had talked to Amelia, who's my girlfriend now, when I talked to her about starting this production company, she's like, what are we going to name it? I was like, the name on the sidewalk. That's a good name. I'm going to go with that. And so we had wrote it down, and I didn't know whether or not that there was an N in it or not. Maybe it was just Brunjo, or was it Brunjo? I didn't know. So I literally wrote down somewhere, I need to consult the sidewalk on this. And one of those days, walking back from that building to the other, I looked down to try and find it. And I had to backtrack because I was like, wait, where is it at? It was on this side. And I walked back the other side just to make sure. And I walked on that side. It was gone. It was replaced. So someone had to come in and refill the concrete for the sidewalk, and it covered that up, or they completely got rid of it. So I was like, did that name even exist then? Or was I thinking about that? Either way, that led to us kind of talking a little bit before the pandemic happened, when I brought in the rest of these people. And then that's when the pandemic hit. And so everything shut down. Everyone shut down. And for that period of time, all I had was those people I was talking to, which Jordan is still with us as well. And then Millie, the other two have moved on to do other things. But either way, those were like my friends. Those were my family. And so we kind of stuck with each other, and we didn't really know what we were going to do. It was just kind of a fun little thing that we were doing for the time being. And it wasn't until I was in that studio, because again, we were still taking classes over COVID. Thankfully, I had like a leftover recording studio that I could have as like a sandbox, whereas everyone else had, you know, like Zoom University. I felt so bad. They just had like their laptop and Logic to learn on, and I have like all this fun stuff to play with. I felt very, very lucky and very blessed in that regard.
So like, you're talking about the equipment that was in that space?
Yeah.
How, like, so was that just there?
Yeah, the guy who owned it they called it the Music Sanctuary back in, I think he opened it in like the 90s or something like that. The guy who owned it, his name was Jeff DeBusk, and he worked on a couple of projects here and there. I don't know of anything notable that he did. I do have some old like framed things of stuff that he did work on, but he was more an electrical engineer than an audio engineer, so he knew how to set things up. But he had hired like other engineers to come in and like work on his stuff, and he would record his own music out there and stuff like that too. But whenever my girlfriend's family ended up buying it, they had left most of the gear just there. And so whenever they sold it, they thought that they were getting all of this gear, but then all those engineers came back and were like, hey, this is actually mine. So they took most of it. So we were left with, I would say, enough to make a studio, but it was still bare bones of like a studio.
So what was there?
They had, the biggest thing that they had was a C24 console from DigiDesign, which I've seen being used a couple of times. I know like Sunset in Memphis has one, I think, still. That was like the biggest thing that they left, but those things are like just big MIDI controllers. They have preamps. They can be good. I didn't really like the sound of them, also because we already had DigiDesign preamps that were external that they left there. They basically left everything that was like in terms of quality. The C24 was the best thing that they left. They left some Yamaha speakers as well, some Mackie speakers, a couple 57s, a 58 or two. Nothing intense. Like there was nothing.
That's amazing. All you need to make a record is 57.
Right. So, I mean, we had, especially for the pandemic, I mean, the fact that I had vaguely a console that I could run stuff through was just perfect.
Well, it's also just a big space.
Yeah.
And you could do a lot of things with mic placement and using the size of the rooms.
Yeah.
And you're isolated in the mountains. I mean, it's pretty beautiful over there.
Yeah.
For as places to be stuck during a pandemic go, it's pretty nice out there.
It isn't bad.
I enjoyed the drive out there.
Yeah, it is definitely a long drive.
And it's not crazy.
Yeah, it's not terrible.
How long did it take you to get over here today?
About 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's not
right. It's not.
It's like just going to the west side of town. Like
yeah,
you have, you know how it is, man. Like
yeah,
you just got to go around downtown basically.
Yeah,
to get over there.
Take the whatever wheel spoke 155.
Yeah,
bypass downtown.
Briley, bro.
Yeah, there you go.
Briley takes you all the way around. It's funny, man. Like during the month of May, we lost our shift at Nudies for like that month. They just took us off that shift, and I started like driving for Uber.
Oh, okay.
Because that was like my only steady income at the time.
Right, right.
And I just got to know the roadways around here doing that. That's one of the benefits of having to do that. It's like you learn your way around town.
Yeah, for real. I never even thought about it like that. I mean, I know a couple of people who do like or did do like DoorDash kind of stuff like that. And they got to know all of the little alleyways that they could go in and out of. Especially, I have a friend like that who did that kind of stuff up in New York.
Oh, man.
No idea how he did that with a car.
Dude.
Might as well get a bike or a little scooter.
Absolutely not, dude.
But yeah,
that sounds like a nightmare.
For real. So
you're out there, and again, like I feel like being stuck out there just for the fact of, I don't know, there's something about that town. It's like a break from the like grind and the like traffic and the tourism and all that part of Nashville. Like you can, it's nice to be like, it's a breather.
It is. I had a band come out and record like 18 or so songs. And that was like the big thing that they loved about it, was that like they could take a break from being inside and doing the music stuff. And when they walk outside, it's not like, you're in a back alley just taking a smoke break with the cars and dumpsters. You're in the middle of the woods when you walk outside. So, I mean, you can kind of get that feeling of like fresh air being in your lungs and being able to look around, and there's plants, there's nature, and people really like having that feeling, especially when they're making music. And that's like one of our biggest selling points. That's why we recently adopted a slogan for the company, which was "Get out of the city, get into your sound."
Ooh, that's nice.
Yeah, one of our friends, one of my coworkers is with us. His name is Jordan. He has a friend who I think is actually related to him in some capacity, like some way, shape, or form, who helped us redesign our website. And he just kind of spitballed that idea at us and just threw it up on the website. And I was like, who came up with that? And he was like, oh yeah, I just kind of threw that together. I was like, that is genius.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's like one of the big sells is to get out of the riffraff of what especially Nashville can have in terms of, the music industry, and just kind of go back to what it meant to make music back whenever it was just for like yourself, or just for friends and for family. I think that is a big benefit of what our studio has, is that there is nothing big industry wise tied to it, so therefore you can kind of just go out there and escape for a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's what people love.
So you get stuck out there and you've got this bare bones equipment, and this is circa 2020 2021.
Yeah, 2020,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So then, like, how does it go from, well, we have this space, we've got this bare bones equipment, to, okay, well, let's get an Audient console and let's do all the stuff?
The big thing that influenced, at least, the push in that direction, was a childhood friend of mine, Brandon, had reached out to me. And he was asking how I was doing, because I hadn't been back to where I was originally from, which is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, Bree's from Pittsburgh. I think we talked about that.
Yeah, exactly. When you last came out, we had talked about that. And so he had reached out to me because he was like, I haven't heard back from you in a while. I haven't seen you here. Because then around the time that I went to college, my family also moved from Pittsburgh to Tampa, Florida. So I was gone from PA entirely. Not like I planned to do that. That's just kind of how life happened.
Yeah.
And so he was reaching out basically just to see how I was doing. And he was like, yeah, so what are you doing? And he was the first person to ask that dreaded question of, what are you going to do after college? I had no idea, because the pandemic was in full swing by that point. That was like June or July of 2020. So it was like, okay, I'm in the middle of a global pandemic and I have someone asking me, what are you planning to do after you're done with the only solid thing I have in my life?
Who knows what any of us are doing
right.
in 2 years.
So after he asked that, I'm literally sitting in the studio because I was just moving some stuff around and cleaning it. And so he had asked that, and I'm on my phone in the studio, and I'm like, what am I going to do after I'm done with college? And I kind of like looked around and I was like, I think I'm in it right now, actually. I think it should be this. Because we had already had the production company like set up. We had already legally filed it as an LLC. So we had the business set up. But it was just kind of one of those things that we did for the fun of saying you did it. Not necessarily like, no one was, at least at the time, wanting to go all in on it. And it wasn't until he asked that question that I was like, okay, I'm going to float this idea by everyone. We should all move down here and renovate this studio to be like our studio. And we should try to do the production thing, because like the world's already ended anyway. Might as well try it. What's the worst that could happen? And so that led to, after college, everyone who was in the company all moved down to Nashville. And we spent a good year and a half renovating that space, because Mr. DeBusk really liked his primary colors in that place. The live room was purple. The control room was emerald green. The other studio was ruby red. The hallway was puke yellow. And the drum room was sky blue. It was like a box of primary colors just chilling. It made no sense. So we took a lot of time to it felt weird for like the first year or two. All of my other friends who had graduated, they're out like interning at studios, and they're working with big shot producers and engineers working on big projects. And I'm like, I'm going to Home Depot for the 8th time this week, putting trim in and painting walls and stuff like that. But it led to us having, like a solid home base that we could do good work in, and work that we were proud to do, and be able to optimize from the ground all the way up. And that constant work, that constant dedication to the work, is what led us to having an album, and then someone else wanted to come in and do another album. And then there was a point where we were working on like 3 albums at a time. And we had that first ever big influx of, actual project money. And we're like, all right, what are we going to do with this? And we all sat around and was like, well, do we like pay ourselves for the first time ever, or we could invest that back into our space? And that is exactly what we did. That's how we ended up getting a console. Why we were even able to afford it was that we were like, we can either take payday now or let it ride for a little bit longer, get more gear, get better at what we're doing so that that payday can become more consistent rather than just, all right, here's one big project, cool, you did it, and move on, which was great because the console that we had in there at the time ended up like absolutely breaking and just ruining itself towards the end of its life there. So we needed a new one anyway.
Yeah. So I think that's a really important point to like linger on for a second, because especially being at that age, like you're out of school, again, you're seeing other people doing things, and there's that kind of like FOMO sets in. There's a lot of pressure to take an initial success and just kind of, well, okay, cool, I gotta live, so we're just gonna take this money and we're gonna split it up. And obviously we can get projects. We're just gonna stay with our current setup and do the thing. But to stand out and to progress like you're talking about, it sometimes is worth taking a little bit of a gamble and going, well, we said we were going to do this, so let's kind of burn some boats and use this initial success to grow the business. And for a studio, that means like having something else to draw people out. And I think it is really cool. Like I went out there, and I don't know, I think it was just me and you and Jordan that day.
I think it was, yeah.
And we just like grabbed some Indian food and
played
around with the console.
Yeah.
And there is something really cool about being outside of the city and still being able to like know, okay, you could track like a full band in here through this console. And there's just something inherently vibier about turning physical knobs and dialing in a sound. I mean, like, okay, we're going to print that.
Yeah.
We're going to decide now that we want this character on this particular instrument or whatever.
Right. That was always a really big thing that a lot of my teachers, whenever they would talk about that, because they were all from like the golden age of recording. They were recording in the 70s to the 90s, whenever that was like, tape was the brand new big thing. Multi-tracking in general was the big thing. And so to them, the creativity of recording came from, well, you can't just record it, go back and then fix all the problems. It had to be whatever you recorded was the gold. It had to be good going in. And so like, even like the first time I ever mixed a track, it wasn't on like Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton or something like that. They made you mix on a console with outboard gear, having to patch that signal into an EQ, and then you have to go over to the EQ and mess with it. And that limitation of having to like know what it is that you're doing without being able to hear it perfectly in the moment is what makes happy accidents happen. It's what makes cool sounds happen. And so I really wanted to do that, especially because the pandemic caused that to not really be a case for us whenever we went back. We were very limited on our studio time, nor were we having like the influx of bands wanting to come in and record, just because the school wouldn't let them because of the pandemic. So, I mean, that era where I was supposed to get out like all of the, I guess, fantasies of using the nice big recording studio and gear kind of happened, but not really. And so when I got out, I just wanted to remake that so that I could have that. And for me, I've been to a bunch of other studios that don't have a console. They don't need it. In fact, the one studio I got that console from, that's why they were getting rid of it. They don't need it. And no, you don't. I've been in some of the A-list studios in Berry Hill that have no console, but they have a crap ton of outboard gear. They have a crap ton of preamps and great mics, no console. They don't need it. The computer's the console at this point. And while I really like that, and I think that that's fun, like you're saying, there's just something about being able to go, all right, this is the kick, this is the snare, these are the overheads, and then here's the first guitar amp mic and the second one, and then this is the bass and this is its DI. Just being able to see everything there and then go, all right, well, I like that bass tone, but what if I want to make it a little more punchy? What do I have in the room with me right now that can do that? That's not digital. Yeah, I have any and every plugin I could ever want on the computer, sure, but everyone else has that too. What do I have in this room with me right now? I've got this outboard gear and I can move the mic if I want to. Let me try doing that, because that, at least for me, it was always a lot more fun. I don't even want to say more creative, because I think you can be just as creative with digital stuff, but it was just more fun for me.
There's something about committing to it.
Yes.
And like, I remember, I think when we were hanging out, like Jordan was just like playing the upright that you guys have in there.
Yeah.
And we just threw a couple of ribbon mics up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, okay, well, like, if I was gonna track, like, what do I want the shape of this piano tone to be?
Right.
It's like, do I want to band pass everything and make it kind of like a gritty, like lo-fi thing?
Yeah.
Do I want it really bright and pretty and like have that like sheen on the high end? Do I want to boost the low end and like have it be like really dark?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, man. There is something magical about not using like your eyes at all to EQ.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I learned to mix in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And even the difference between like, you're using the stock Pro Tools plugin, right? You don't have like the spectrum graph of like the live frequencies coming in, like you have with like Fab Filter or whatever, right?
Right.
But you still have a graphic readout, and you're like looking at very specific. You can get really kind of surgical with it.
Yeah.
But that's not really the case on a console.
Yeah.
Like that. It's like, do you want more low end? I have one knob for you, sir.
Right.
You know, like that's it. So talk to me about like those first projects. Like, after you invest in the console,
mm-hmm.
what does that do for the company? What kind of clients does that typically attract? And what's your experience been like post? Now we have this sick console. What are we gonna do?
Well, when we had first gotten it, the whole reason why I wanted to even get that console was because, we had just gotten the initial down payment from 2 big projects, like 2 full-length albums that wanted to do all of these songs with us. And I really wanted to take that and find a way to be able to reinvest that not only in myself for me, but for them. I was like, you're paying me a lot of money to do these tracks and to do them well. And I know for a fact that, like my console that I had, which was a Tax Scorpion from like the 80s, which was like a pro amateur board at the time. Even we were able to use it. I found like one of the songs I ended up doing with another client of ours, it turned out really well. And like after that track, it basically died. But either way, I was like, I want to find something that is better for these people if they're trusting me to do their projects justice. And so that was when we had like this whole debate on what console to even get. There was a moment where we were going to get some other sort of AMEC console. I looked at like Allen and Heath consoles. I was just trying to look at anything and everything. And then I found that one, which was way out of my price range for it. But what it had offered would it be able to scale up not only with the projects that I had now, but projects that I'd have down the line. And so we took the risk on that and did it. And it was crazy because the moment we got that console in there, I'm not even kidding. The next day I had to get that thing set up, ready to go, because the next day we had a whole weekend of recording one of those projects. So it was like, all right, time to really figure out if I can use this thing, which we also found out all of the problems with it that, the other people that not told us about, which I don't even think they knew about because they had just let it sit as well. So, I mean, that's the risk of buying a console, that's for sure. But either way, we got in there and some of the channels weren't working quite right. Some of the preamps weren't working quite right. Some of the EQ buttons were like stuck in, so they were constantly on. So you had to make sure that everything was normal for specific channels and stuff like that. So it definitely had its own kinks to work out.
Mhm.
Sometimes like the talkback button wouldn't work. We also, for the longest time, we didn't have a talkback mic. So we just plugged in a 57 and used that. Fine, good enough. But the biggest, hardest part was trying to understand its sound. Because like our old TAC Scorpion had a very, how I say, like cloudy sound to it. It sounded good, definitely better than like a Tascam console, which are super cloudy, almost have no mid-range and low end whatsoever. It was better than that, but this new console was so clean, so much detail that I was not pushing it as much as I could have been pushing it. And so like the first couple of projects that I did with it were very soft, very low end heavy because I didn't realize that those preamps were able to do that. I didn't know that a mic could really sound like that on them because I was so used to the other console. But getting to know the sound of like your preamps and then your EQs and then whether you're pushing more into the bus, like you can, at least on our console, you can almost clip the bus in a certain way too. So that's its own gain stage. You could clip the preamp and then clip the bus if you wanted to and get a crazy sound on it. But that's not something I realized until like most of those two projects were kind of out the door. It was like a, whoa, all right. So this thing is good enough to be able to kind of keep me on my toes and have me figure out what I need to do to make that even better, which, goes to even other bigger consoles too. Like if someone all of a sudden starts using an API or like an SSL, it's going to be a completely different sound than a Neve would. Or you could be like a couple of people I know that have all three of them and just pick your poison at that point. But, learning that the Audient sound, I didn't know. I'd never worked on one before. I had those other three, but never Audient. And so learning something new was definitely the biggest challenge of it.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of pressure. What people don't understand is like when you do upgrade studio gear and you're working at the same time, it's what you would in a perfect world, you would have had at least a couple weeks, right, to learn what those pre's do in the room, because like every room is different.
Yep.
It's not just the mic and it's not just the outboard gear. It's where is the mic in the room.
Yeah.
Like all of that stuff matters, right? So you're like kind of on the fly having to figure all that out.
Yeah.
With clients there.
With clients, yeah. Like not only like the room and the mic, but then that person who's playing too. Like, I'll play drums on tracks and I'm a lot more quiet. So when I play, I'm a lot more reserved and held back compared to another drummer who come in and they really like to beat the hell out of it, which is great. But that means when you're in there, like, okay, for me, maybe push the preamp. Not so much for the other guy, but you can definitely push him on the bus. You may, because then you could level out all of those different mics coming in and really have that distortion come in when they're being summed together rather than just the individual like it would be for me. Because that makes sense for me. I'm not going to peak over a certain thing, so you can push me there. Trying to figure out, where to properly, I guess, gain stage different players in different respects. Even like with guitarists, some guitarists are very, very soft and sultry with the way that they pick, and others are really harsh with it. And that depends on the mic choice, but also how you're using the console. How you route those things together really does change how you hear and perceive that player too. Yeah.
So what are some of like your, I guess I shouldn't ask, what are some of your favorite projects that you've done? because then someone's going to hear this and be like, that son of a bitch, he didn't like mine. No, I mean, but I guess a cool way to talk about this would be you just had an album come out like a few weeks ago
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
that you were actually working on around the time that we met last year. So talk about that project.
So that project, it's called Pastures by a longtime friend. I can't even really call her a client because she's been with us since the very beginning. Her name is Natalie Del Carmen. We met in school, like when we had just started our production company. We had just gotten back to Boston, doing the whole studio thing, and she really wanted to do another project with us because she had done one kind of like remotely. Everything at that time was remote, but she wanted to do another one with us. And so she kind of stuck around and she never stopped. I mean, she just ended up loving how we approached her music and how we approached her production and the style of making that from beginning to end. She just loved it. And she had tried working with other people in LA, I remember, but there was just something about the way that we worked that she was really connected to, you know, like the people that were around.
Talk to me about that process. Like when you work with an artist, when an artist comes in, it's like, okay, did she have demos?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so she comes in with demos.
Yeah.
What does that process look like with y'all? And like, was she at all specific about what was better?
Right. I would, when we talked about the Pastures record, we had already done an album with her too, kind of before then. One of them named Bloodline, and then she did an EP called Tandem Songs, and she had a couple of others that were produced by other people on that one too. So kind of did like an album and a half ish with her before this one came about. And so when she had bought her demos to us for this newest record, it was a little bit different because like up until that point they were more electronic. Like I was saying, we did everything remote. So everything was built in like a Logic session that we would then bounce out the stems for, and then we'd go into Pro Tools and we'd go from there. And it was kind of just communicating back and forth via like email or text or something like that. And then when we got into that next EP, the Tandem Songs one, that's when we started really digging heavily into like the Americana style of things. And that really was the starting distinction of like the production styles. Because I've worked with a bunch of people where they'll want like, okay, I want to do X, Y, and Z for my song here. All right, that's very digital. So I can come up with a couple different ideas. I can come up with a part. We can change the tone whenever you want and move on. Easy. You get into Americana folk though, that's not really the point. The point is to have someone who's in the room coming up with their part for your song. And so in the album Bloodline, we kind of experimented with that. It shifted to that because it started electronic, and funny, the album itself starts very electronic and moves to very Americana. And then the Tandem Songs one was more so cementing that Americana style. So when she started asking us about Pastures around January of 25, that was like, okay, how do we want to approach this? Well, the songs that we had done up until that point that were Americana, the ones that she loved, like What Should Have Been By Now was one of them. That was just a full day recording where we bought in a specific player for a specific instrument because of that specific feel they had for that. Or, you know, because some people owed other people favors. You know how Nashville works, you know? Like, oh, can I get a harmonica player on that? Yeah, he owes me a favor. It's fine. He'll come in. So that was more so the style that she wanted to do. And she didn't have too much time because everything was coming out of pocket for her. She was spending pretty much just her money that she was saving to make this project happen. So, I mean, for her, time was of the essence because couldn't really afford to get more time. And so that led to the production style being, all right, we'll figure out what it is that we need to convey to our players, which most of the time was us. There was some other people that we'd bring in that would come and play. Sometimes they'd come in and engineer too. But the whole point was like, let's listen to your song, hear what these chords should be so that these people know what to dance over top of. And then from there, when we're in the room, what are you liking from this person? Okay, is that going to step on the toes of somebody else, or do we want that to step on the toes of somebody else? And so it was a very different process compared to like some of those very earlier sessions that we had that were all digital, because I could mix it however I wanted to. Jordan could throw whatever arrangement he wanted. If someone came back and said, I don't really like this part here, just take that out. Okay, easy. Not so much whenever you have a whole group of people in the room and they want to get it right the first time, and you kind of can't afford to not get it right the first time. You have to get that vision completely ironed out before those people even walk in.
Again, that kind of circles back to the whole like, well, when we're just going to commit to what the arrangement
Yes.
is going to be, because we've got people in the same room playing, then it's just got to be what it's going to be.
Yeah.
I think that is a distinction that I like to make. The reason it's called records,
right,
is because it was like, this is a record of what we did in this room.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's a different way of framing it. Like an album, yeah, it's an album, but like what makes it a record is it shows where you were in that place and time to some degree, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the appeal for Natalie was that, you know, it's a shift from we could change everything after the fact if we wanted to that's what you're putting out.
Yeah. And being able to work with, like, especially mistakes that happen during those moments. Like, even back when I was learning about this stuff, like you think back to the old ancient legends of recording and engineering, like Rudy Van Gelder or even Al Schmidt, who are just putting mics in rooms. I mean, they barely even EQ'd, because to them, EQ was the big fancy thing that was brand new technology. To them, it was like, oh, I'm going to EQ it. They're like, why would you EQ it? Just go move the mic. Or if you don't like that sound, get a different mic. To them, you know, that was more so what studios were like back then. It was a really nice room with really nice mic options. So yeah, that was easier to do. But I think that goes to like the point that you're talking about. It's like committing to what is happening in that moment rather than I want to. And I think that goes even to like a bigger sort of shift on almost how people approach making music now, which is like, I want this idea of me being in this room doing this, not actually doing it. And having done a little bit of both, it is a lot harder to get that pure record of someone just in the room doing that. But that's kind of why people like it so much. I mean, those classic jazz records are so good because of the guys who played on it, just being in the room, being them. And then you'll have other people come in like nowadays wanting to act like they were on some big jazz record and then, I don't know, just trying to fill in whatever sort of AI generated thing that they wanted there for that kind of sound. And I can kind of understand it, but there's something to be said about people being in a room committing to being their pure self and who they are, problems and all. I mean, the amount of and this often is something that I don't think people highlight in recording, but there's a lot of emotion that goes on there. There's a lot of people getting upset at their part and not liking what they played, or maybe thinking that what you're playing is not fitting what their vision is. And so you guys like have to sit there and figure that out together. And, you know, being able to separate your ego from the project and just go, all right, what is framing my artist in the correct way? What is framing this player in the correct way? And how can I get that to be as genuine to them and the project as a whole as I possibly can? I mean, that's like the hardest part. That's what I think with the newest record with Natalie, with Pastors, was something that I feel like I hadn't done up until that point, that all of us hadn't done. It was so genuine. The material that she was talking about, like what she was singing about and writing about, was something everyone in that room connected with. Even back in the demos, we were talking about like, yeah, I feel you. I feel like, you know, one of her songs, El Cortez, is all about being like on the top of the world and everything is great. Yeah, I have those moments. And then you go to another song that she has, like Plans Upon Plans, where you make all these plans. You have these big dreams and these aspirations, and they all just fall apart. And so those plans are just plans. Like they're never going to actually happen. Everyone felt that. And because everyone felt that, and everyone had a lot of emotion to sort through, yeah, there were times when we would, I wouldn't say argue. It's not like there were any, like full on yelling matches going on with anyone in there. It wasn't that dramatic, but people would say to me on like the drums, like, I don't like that. Like you should do something different there. That doesn't feel right. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think this fits. And you go into the room and you sit there and listen with everyone and you feel what everyone else feels. And you're like, all right, well, if they're not feeling what I feel, then this isn't right. I got to find something that latches to what everyone else is feeling too. Like specifically, there was a song on that record called Leanne. And the reference to that track was, what's the John Mayer song? Walt Grace Submarine Ride.
Oh yeah, Walt Grace, The Submarine Test, 1967.
Yes,
like
that song was the big reference material, which is one that, funny enough, Amelia brought up back when we listened to the demos. And she was like, this has a very similar feel to that. And so I went to go in and record drums to it. And if you know that song, it's a very weird beat. It's not a traditional sounding beat. It's more of like a march than like a drum beat.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was trying to find a way to do that. And the song's about friendship because it's about her friend Leanne. It's about companionship. And so, I mean, I even tried stuff as weird as like bringing in somebody else into the drum room to help play this part with me. Because I thought, oh, well, if it's about friendship, it'd be cool to have the drum part, have a friend in it. And that just wasn't working. It just didn't fit. And so we spent like 4-5 hours going back and forth with just me in the drum room trying a beat. No, that doesn't work. Okay, how about this one? No, that's not working either. All right, well, let's try changing the miking. No, that's not it. All right, well, what if I switched out the snare drum? No, that's not it either. And then I remember to go to like the point of like, production and how to produce something and recording that essence of the moment. I was just like, all right, I've heard everyone's complaints. I've heard what they like. I need you guys to do me a favor and record 2 versions of the drum tracks because I'm going to do 2 parts and layer them on top of each other. I'm going to turn the lights off in this drum booth and I don't want to hear any comments until I have gotten my idea out entirely. Because up until that point, it was just one idea halfway developed, another idea halfway developed. I was like, okay, let me just get one full idea out and then we can go from there. And like, I kid you not, shut the lights off, one take all the way through, another take all the way through. And I remember that moment. I was so scared. I was like, oh God, we so don't have enough time to keep harping on this. We really got to move on. I hope this is it. And they got on the talk back and they're like, that was perfect. That was it. Everyone liked that. And it was like, sometimes it really does take going through something incredibly stressful and incredibly difficult because, I don't know, something happens, something emerges even within you that just goes, no, I know what it is now. It's this,
Well, I think something that I've noticed from working with clients, like when we were in North Carolina, all of this equipment was in a brick and mortar studio location.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything crazy fancy, but it's the difference between just being an engineer who knows how to like push record.
Right.
And being a producer. And being a producer is I am invested in what the artist's vision is. I'm not just here to solve technical problems.
Right.
And I feel like some people conflate those two things.
Mm-hmm.
They call themselves a producer because they have the equipment and they know technically what each little part of it does and how to operate it.
Right.
But if you don't know how to communicate with people, more specifically artists, which is sometimes very difficult to do so in a productive way, then you're not really producing and you're not, you're offering a service that you're not providing.
Yeah.
And you being willing to take all of that, sometimes constructive, sometimes not, criticism.
Yeah.
And figure out a way to interpret it into changes that you can make to meet that vision. That's what producers get paid for.
Right.
That's what makes you a producer, is when you can take that, whatever the feedback is, and make the project better
Yeah.
in response to it.
Yeah. And specifically like on that project, like wherever that project is going. Cause like I've worked on a couple of projects that I didn't necessarily have anything I could relate to with it. It was not made for me. It would be made for somebody else. And I think while those are some of the hardest things to produce, I think they also are the best exercise for that too. To be able to detach yourself so much from it that you are still putting yourself into it. I mean, I feel like at least production is no different than playing an instrument because through an instrument, it's that weird abstract communication. You know, how can I convey to my audience through just playing a guitar that I am angry? Well, you have to build up a general overall, this is what I normally feel like playing a guitar to even figure out what is it like when I'm angry. And that doesn't necessarily mean strumming it harder. I mean, that could be the difference in chords. It can be difference in picking pattern, but it all depends on you and yourself internally and how you can take that abstract communication and present it to somebody. Because it's like the presentation of it is just as important as the generation of it. Being able to make that and make it feel like that, and then being able to present it like, okay, this is how I think and how I feel. You can interpret it however you want, but this is how I'm presenting it. Like I worked on a project with someone who was mainly just wanting to make a song for themselves to prove that they went from being younger to now they're older. And I want to make a song that is almost for my younger self, for my older self. And it was like, whoa, that has nothing to do with me whatsoever. But I feel what you're going for there. Like, how would I want someone to help me through that? And then you kind of infer, all right, how can I express to them and their audience exactly how they should be thinking and feeling? And that really takes getting to know that person. And sometimes it's easier said than done with a lot of people. But I think that's where the real, like you're saying, where the real work of production comes from is not only being able to figure out everything in a technical aspect, but being able to go into someone's, I don't want to say necessarily psyche, but their mind, and be able to work with them in harmony as well. Not just like some of the other people I've heard, horror stories about, which is just like, all right, I like your song or I don't like your song. I'm going to get my people on it to do the same thing they do every other time that they're in here. And I'm going to make your song that sounds like my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Give me money. And it's like,
yeah, I mean, it's, to me, it comes down to empathy.
mm-hmm.
Like, can I sit in a room across from somebody and they tell me what they're trying to communicate, and given that information and the artists that they've given me as references, get something out that sounds like that to them?
Yeah. To them is the big highlight.
so that they go, yeah, that represents me as an artist.
Yeah.
And there's so many elements to that. But if you're not open enough to be like trying to figure that out, the whole thing is a lost cause.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people came to me and like, I don't have the nicest gear. I didn't have a soundproof, building like some of these other, like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
But I listened to what they had to say.
Yeah.
And even if it took me a while, I tried to get it as close to what they wanted.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like, look, you paid me for the time. Once you leave, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I don't care what it sounds like, and that's not how you work with people.
No, that was also like a big thing that they would always try to teach, and that's a really hard thing to teach. And I mean, you can't, especially in like a normal like school kind of setting. How do you teach someone to work well with somebody else. I mean, it entirely depends on the person you are and the person that they are. And sometimes it just doesn't work. I'm grateful that they at least, made us have to work with other people. Like we had to work with other engineers before and then work with various artists where you were the producer. And I mean, I screwed up a couple of them because I overpromised and would underdeliver, not quite knowing what exactly was a lot of work or was no work at all. And so I would overpromise a lot of things, and I made a lot of people upset. I mean, those were really important lessons to know, especially going into making it a business, because that is a big thing that I hear a lot of other producers doing too, which is not being able to connect with the person they're making the project for. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that someone who's like, you look back at, I at least for me, I always think duo of artist and producer. I go back to like Billie Eilish and Phineas because they're just so close. The reason why that worked so well and why they could do it in a bedroom was because of the connection they had with each other. They knew exactly what they wanted. I can imagine Jack Antonoff got to know Sabrina Carpenter very well when he was working on that stuff. He knew what she wanted and how he could fit into that. It's like he wasn't trying to take over, which is funny because now, Phineas is kind of trying to take over and do his own thing. But either way, funny aside. But like being able to understand your artist and where they're going, where they want to go, is really something that I think bars a lot of people from even trying to work with producers, is because that's a terrifying thing to do. I originally, like way before I even got in, wanted to do the engineering and the production side of things because I wanted to help my own music. And it wasn't until I worked with other people that I realized, like, oh, I know what I want from my own music. And I've messed with that before. I've produced and engineered all my own stuff before, and it's fine. I can get myself there. But I really loved being able to attach myself to someone else's project and be able to help them figure that out, because there's just something that can emerge there that is greater than the sum of its parts whenever you have everyone fixated on that one thing. And I guess a lot of times people can conflate that to like the artist themselves. Like the artist is the one that is driving it, and a lot of times they are, but it's not always just them too. Like whenever I would talk to, one of my teachers was Susan Rogers, who engineered like the Purple Rain album for Prince. And so she would talk a lot, and it was funny because you'd think, okay, engineer, she's going to tell me about, this certain mic technique, and I should run it through the board and have this kind of gain stage. I'm not even kidding. I don't think she ever talked about that, ever. The mics, the placement of them, or how you like set up your session was never the thing that was important to her, ever. It was always, who are you working with and how are they wanting to work? Because that, at the end of the day, especially for, God, I couldn't even imagine working with someone like Prince.
Yeah.
But that's
I think I've seen some interviews with her talking about, because his hours and stuff were always so insane,
crazy. Yeah.
of just like, and he didn't want anybody around.
Yep.
When he was like writing and stuff, it was like, basically you have to be there obviously to like hit record. But other than that, can you please shut up and like
let me do my thing?
Don't talk to me, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, she had gone off about one of my favorite stories that she ever told us in one of those classes was how no matter where it is that they were recording, Prince had to have a grandma chair, that he called it, where he would specifically, I don't know if it was them as engineers, I mean, it might have been, but like, someone had to go to like a thrift store and find the most grandma looking chair that had like a floral pattern and was big and gaudy. And he would want that in the studio to be his chair that he sat in. He had to have the grandma chair. I always thought that was such a
bizarre.
Funny story.
what an, like, I mean, given other things that I've heard about him, like it tracks, but
right?
It's like, it's just really funny.
But yeah, going back to like being able to work with somebody like that, being able to put, for lack of a better words, faith in that person and, what it is that they believe will get themselves to open up and, I don't know, spread their wings musically to be as creative as they possibly can be. And knowing that sometimes that's not the artist, sometimes it's the producer who's working on it. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that there are points in times where that's the engineer who is, I mean, especially look back at like the Beatles records, that was definitely the engineers that were coming up with those crazy ideas, and Beatles were all like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds fun. And knowing that it is a group effort, that was a big thing I learned recording that Pastures record, because we did it straight through one whole week, no stop. We would record, sleep, eating every once in a while in between there with Costco sandwiches and whatnot. But just going straight through, just trying to make something the best that you possibly can, and letting everyone kind of have their wheelhouse and feel comfortable in it. Like me engineering some things, but then whenever I'd have to go play drums, it'd be Amelia having to engineer. And the way she engineers is completely different than the way I engineer. So I mean, the drum tone would be entirely different than if I was able to set it up myself and then also hear myself play. But that's kind of like that faith you have to have in people of like, all right, you've got this. This is your wheelhouse. Like with Natalie and the songwriting, there were a lot of times before we even worked on that record where we had always talked about like, songwriting changes and maybe moving the form around and stuff like that. And it's not that there weren't conversations like that for this one, but there was more so an understanding of like, okay, I've talked with her about, form and the songwriting aspect of things. And she knows that she doesn't have a chorus here and she's not repeating the chorus over and over again like a top 100 song would. She knows she wants that. I don't need to go over it again, and I don't want to, because that's her. She wants to do that. She wants to present it like that. And she wouldn't, most of the time at least, I mean, unless it was, just didn't fit the project, she would not contest the way Jordan would engineer something, because sometimes he would add a part that didn't quite sound right. And eventually, whenever we got to the end of it, the end of the day, it fit great, but it just took building everything else. So, allowing people to have the space to be themselves too in that recording is really big. Artists or not,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. So in 2026, what are you looking forward to? What's new with you, man? What's going on?
Man, it's crazy because I had just finished up not only Natalie's record from this past year, but a couple of other records and projects all kind of got done right as the end of the year kind of came to a close. I'd say like a little bit before the Thanksgiving time of things, because from Thanksgiving onward to the new year, it's like just pure chaos. But I got a lot of things finished up, and now I'm kind of like, I don't know, I'm kind of like waiting in the water, just waiting for the next big wave of something that's going to happen. I've been really reflective the past couple of weeks, almost the past month, especially with the snowstorm that came in, and we were trapped out there. Like, you've been to our driveway.
Oh, dude,
That thing with
yeah.
ice. No, that the ice there it's like a faux Mount Everest whenever it snows. Not fun, especially because there's a drop off on both sides of that.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, no, not fun. So we were stuck in that house for about a week, 7 to like 9-ish days that we were just out there. We had power, thankfully, but it gave me a lot of time to like reflect and go like, all right, what is the next thing? Where am I heading next? And there is one thing that is kind of going on, which is Amelia's stepdad does prison ministry for Parchment Penitentiary down in Mississippi. And he's been trying since I've known him to get this one specific guy, his name is Wolf, almost like free, because of what he did was, I don't know. I wish I knew the story. He told it to me like 3 or 4 times. And you think I'd remember some of it, but I know he's trying to like get him free because he always wanted to do music. He always wanted to be a singer, and just that's not what life threw at him. That was not the option that he got. And so he's been in prison his whole life. And so Brian, his name's Brian, he went in, he's doing like the prison ministry thing with Parchment, which is thankfully gotten better over the past couple of years. And so he was able to bring not only Amelia, Jordan, and I to the prison to play music for these inmates, but also bringing in, I'm pretty sure Bobby Rush is Grammy Award winning blues guy who like was hanging around with like James Brown and like BB King back in the day. And he got him to come in and talk to these guys in prison, and we were able to play with them. And he's trying to get a record together so that he can get, I think, the governor of Mississippi to pardon this guy named Wolf. And so he's going gung ho on that project. So that's like the only thing that I can think of. He wants me to work with it like engineering wise and record some stuff. But other than that, I don't really know what's coming up for the future. I've been messing around with recording some like live stream stuff just for fun on the side. I've been doing that. I've been mixing here and there as well, but nothing too crazy, at least not yet. You always have those periods where it's like, more still. And that's one I'm in at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just that kind of that time of year, man, where it's just
It is.
everything kind of slows down a little bit, January and February.
Yeah.
That would be a really interesting project, though. Like if you got someone like paroled from Parchment Farm and then like got to record their music, because there's actually like a lot of traditional blues music mentions that particular prison.
Yeah, Parchment.
And that would just be kind of nuts.
Yeah, I mean, having like been there, because we got to go there, and we got to play for some of the inmates. I got to, funny enough, completely by accident, was escorted to their death row, where like all of the people who are there are sentenced to death and having to grapple with that and the decisions that they've made. And the whole point of what Brian's trying to do is just to try and like Ringo Starr and bring peace and love into there, because what more do those guys have to look forward to than quite literally death? And being in the room with them, it was so weird to feel the weight of that. I can leave and those guys cannot leave. I mean, for the whole prison in general, just being able to go in and interact and talk with these people. And I mean, I don't know. It was definitely a weird feeling being in there, being with people that I know are, convicted felons. But, for a brief period of time, like when I'm in there, they're just people. And that was something different. That was a weird, but very, it's a complicated feeling. Like it was very, I can't think of a better word other than like a blessed experience. Just being able to.
I'm sure that it makes you appreciate, a lot of the hand we end up with in life is entirely luck. And a lot of people, don't want to include the decisions that we make in that.
Yeah.
But we all are born into very disparate worlds depending on who your parents are, what time you were born, like the socioeconomic conditions of where you were born.
Yeah.
And, a zig versus a zag or a left versus a right turn can put you down a path where the outcomes are entirely opposite of where you currently sit. So,
and of what you want.
I think realizing that fact and then being in a room with a bunch of people who it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
Like it seems like that would be pretty overwhelming.
It was. The way Brian put it whenever we were in there was like, I don't think you realize the weight that is in here until you leave. Because then he was like, I guarantee you when you get done with this like 3-day stint that we had going in and out of the prison where, I mean, you were allowed to bring your phone, but they recommended not doing so because obviously you're in a prison. Someone would probably try to take advantage of the fact that you brought your phone in, right? So they recommended leaving anything that was valuable or personal, just don't bring it in. Like you can bring in your gear, that's fine. We'll have people watching that, but you know, your pockets aren't necessarily safe. But you know, to go into that room and then walk back out and then go back in and walk back out, he was saying like the weight, you don't quite understand the heaviness that you're carrying when you're in there until you're able to leave, and then you don't have to come back. And then you feel how much weight was really on you. And I kind of thought he was just like, you know, maybe over exaggerating. But I mean, after we got done with that project, I went back home for the next couple of days and I just didn't want to move because like you're saying, all of that is hitting you. And then you have to relate that to now the experience that you have out here, knowing that that exists, not only just in that area, but however many times in all these other prisons all around the world and all these other people that are, because you think like, especially with the rat race that goes on in Nashville, like, oh well, I'm not working in these really big studios and I don't have, like you're saying, the nicest gear, or I'm not working with the biggest producer and engineer, blah blah blah, I'm not signed to whatever major label. And you can get so caught up in doing that over and over and over again that you can really like lose sight of like, holy crap, I'm able to just do what I want to do. I can express myself. I can play guitar. I can play drums. I can make my own song. I can go to work and go out to eat and do what I want on a daily basis. And there are a lot of people that don't have that choice and still have to grapple with the same existential issues that we all have. And it's like, it definitely smacks you in the face with some realism, like, okay, things aren't so bad. Doesn't mean you should like, phone everything in, but like, get some realism, get some perspective in there. It definitely helped with that, like to the point where I'm definitely going to do that project with him. I don't know how long it's going to take, but that was something that like, I don't even really care about whether or not it does well or not, because that's not the point. I mean, even going in and just playing for those guys, I mean, talk about a captive audience, I know, but like being able to play for people who straight up haven't seen a live performance in decades, and they're hearing you play. It's like you could play probably anything and they'd be okay with it, but also they're the harshest critics, because why would they care? What do they need to care for? It's not like they're worried about Spotify numbers. They're not worried about how many people you've impressed or rubbed shoulders with. They don't care. They just care about you being you. And they can see right through that. They have to deal with that every day. There were people that I got to talk to that I felt like were looking right through me, trying to see what was behind me. And there were other people that couldn't even see me because they were just so hollow. And so to be able to express yourself and to play something musically for those kind of people and have them like actually intently listening was just like, okay, I understand music a little bit more and what that means for people beyond the numbers, beyond the Spotify playlists and working in the A-list studios. Like, what does music mean for the human connection,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. It was a good time.
Well, I hope that like you're, is it, you said it was Amelia's stepdad?
Yeah, Amelia's stepdad.
Well, I
His
hope
name is
that
Brian Ward.
I hope that, he's successful in that endeavor and like you get to actually do that project.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be really rewarding, man.
Yeah. Me too.
Let's see. How long we've been going? Oh, about an hour and a half. Okay. I want to do the lightning round kind of thing
All
that
right.
I do with like everybody. It's kind of a lightning round. It's just like a series of questions that I ask everybody.
Sure.
As specific as you can be, like not a thing that you used to do on a regular basis, but like a very particular moment in time. What is your earliest memory of music?
Ooh, earliest memory of music. Now I gotta like dig through the archives. I remember trying to go back to as early as possible. I remember being in kindergarten, and you do kindergarten things every day, make a mess out of everything, and your desk is all messy, the room's all messy. I remember my teacher would always put on at the very end of the day, Walking on Sunshine, and she would say, by the end of this song, the whole place needs to be cleaned up and you guys sitting at your desks, and then I will dismiss you. And so we had like 3 minutes to like panic. All right, you put away the Legos, grab the coloring sheets and fold them up. Where's my jacket? It's got to be on my chair, kind of thing. And I just remember running around as like a little kid to Walking on Sunshine, like panicked and stressed, like it needs to go away. And then if you didn't sit at your desk by the time that song was fading out, like you heard the fade out and you're like, I gotta go. And you're running to your desk to sit down.
Bro, I don't know if that's like a positive or negative. It sounds like it's the idea of like, I'm like 5 and I'm kind of traumatized, but it's also I'm walking on sunshine. Right? You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm going to use this really upbeat, happy song to terrorize these children into being ready to leave for the day. That is a good one. That is, out of all the answers that I've gotten to that question, that is like so funny, dude, and out of pocket. Okay. Living or dead, if you could collaborate with anyone, who would it be?
Living or dead. That's a tough one. Cause like, I feel like if I was going more of the artist route of things, I remember one of, alongside like Coldplay and Radiohead being my big influences, of course, Michael Jackson was one of the biggest influences I ever had. And being able to like watch those like behind the scenes of him making the demo for like Beat It and just being able to do that, I would have died to be able to collaborate with him on something, simply because he just kind of exuded musical ability. I don't even want to necessarily say talent, because that's like an objective thing, but like you can't deny that he was able to arrange an entire track just with his voice, and it was just kind of like thrown at people like, yeah, go ahead, try that out. What do you think? And then they were able to take whatever they wanted from that and use it however. But just to be able to be in the room with him and to like write a song with him would be amazing, just for like, okay, how can I, take what he's doing and use that for myself and be able to learn from that or gain inspiration from that. But if I had to go more of the like technical, like engineering side of things, I'd probably have to go, and he would not have been a very enjoyable person to be around, but Rudy Van Gelder was probably my like top tier audio engineer, just because everything he did was in secret. He never allowed anyone to take photos of his mics. They weren't allowed in his studio because to him that was his copyrighted property. It's like, you can go in and take photos of the people. You can't take photos of my mic placement. That's my property. You can't do that. And so like I would have died to just not even like wrote anything down, but just gotten to understand the psychology of how he was doing what he was doing. That would have been stellar.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Hell yeah, man. Okay. If you could go back to the beginning of your career, let's say, and this could be, you could maybe think about this as like when you're graduating or even like getting into performing. If you could give yourself advice based off of what you know now, what do you think the most important thing would be to go back and tell your beginning self?
I would say I learned about this, I don't know if it's like an idea or like an ideology, but it's this, I guess, construct called tensegrity. And tensegrity involves something being rigid, but still allowing movement. So like if you've ever seen those, like those stands where they have like, I don't know, like a string and like a magnet, and it looks like it's like floating in midair, but it's actually supporting itself through this weird looking floating thing. That's kind of like what the idea of tensegrity is being able to float on top of a rigid structure and have it stay together as a cohesive thing. the big problem that I always had when I was younger, and honestly, even still to this day, is that I always want to put such a rigid structure to something. Like I want to make sure that when I go to play something, I have it down perfect, and I'll go over it over and over and over again. Sometimes in the past, to the point where it was to a detriment. I did it so much that I'm now adding in way too much nuance of those tiny little parts rather than just going with the full picture. And so like graduating from like high school, going into college, I really worried about that. And I really tried to like make sure everything had some sort of rigid structure. And the older I got, the more that kept falling apart. Because if life worked on a rigid structure for everyone, who knows what it would look like? Because that's just not how life works. You can have the best laid plans, and then something happens that completely and utterly destroys all of them. Okay, what do? Do you just leave those pieces there, or do you pick them up and try to do something with it? Well, why bother? Because I spent all this time, yada, yada. So I would really love to go back and tell myself, like, it's okay if there are some pieces and connections to not only performing music, but making it and the production side of things. It's okay to have those rigid areas, but you got to have those loose connected areas too. Allow that to flex, to move. Sometimes it won't go in the direction that you want, but that doesn't mean it won't overall become the thing that you've always dreamed of it being. Being able to let yourself flow with whatever life throws at you and still find a way to keep your own internal structure is like what, in my mind, music boils down to, is having a structure, having something it's based on, but it is allowed to move and it is allowed to flow, rather than, doing one crazy amount of structure, or like what happened later on in life where I went way too much with the flow. Like I ended up just becoming like a bunch of strings if it wasn't just like blocks. Like things became way too loosey-goosey.
Mhm.
And so like, that pendulum swing of, all right, everything's going to be rigid and then everything's going to be loose and free form. It's like, it's got to be somewhere in between. If you're going loose, find a way to make it structured. If you're going structured, find a way to make it loose. Don't let that pendulum swing too far in one direction to where it breaks apart and then you don't want to do anything with it anymore. That'd be the big thing I'd tell my younger self.
Right on, man. Tell the folks where they can keep in touch.
Oh, well, I mean, I've got my own YouTube channel, which is just my name, at Tanir Morrison. And then if you want to check out the production company, it's just www.brunjo.com, Brunjo. On top of that, I kind of have an Instagram, still Tanir_Morrison, but I don't really use Instagram that much. I use YouTube more than anything. But yeah, those are the places that you can find me.
Right on, dude. Thanks so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to The Good, the Bad, and the Music podcast. Again, I'm your host, and I've had the pleasure of hanging out with my friend,
Tanner. Thank you so much, Tyler. This has been awesome.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course.
All right.